everybody, Backyard Bullion here. Now over the last couple of years here on YouTube, I've been pretty critical of silver as an investment tool that is supposedly going to shoot the moon, or even as a prepping tool to help in that barter economy when the brown stuff might hit the fan. And as of late, my thinking has started to evolve. I've started noticing more things happening, certainly here in the UK, that just make me stand back a second and think a little bit more about why I've got silver and what the potential advantages of having that silver might be in the future. So today we're going to talk a little bit about that, how I've got some changing attitudes towards prepping and stacking in that sense of the word. I started out very early on in my silver buying career as a person who wanted to buy it and sell it in a year or two and make a short, quick profit on it. But then things change and situations change and outlooks change and thinking evolves, and that's the whole purpose of today's video. So I'm going to share some thoughts and opinions. They are just that, thoughts and opinions. I'm by no means a financial expert or planner or anything silly like that. I'm just sharing what I think about silver at the moment. And I've got a whole bunch of lovely fractional stuff out here, which I think really talks well about what this whole thing is about, this whole prepping side of things, and the fact that the world is changing so quickly. And you look at the mess that the UK is in at the moment with Brexit. Now, for those who haven't really been following, in the UK we had what's called a proroguement of Parliament, which sounds like a very fancy word, and it is essentially a fancy word for basically postponing or just holding over until another time. Basically, the government has been shut down for a short period of time to have a break, to get together its legislative agenda for the future. But that's really quite scary that we have essentially, and look, this is not meant to be a Boris Johnson rant, it's not meant to be a political rant, and I don't really want to have a political rant in the comment section either, but the nuts and bolts of it is we have a Prime Minister that was elected by 0.1% of the population, and he has suspended Parliament at an incredibly sensitive time. Now, there's going to be positives and negatives for that regards Brexit, but again, I don't really want to get into that whole argument. The point is, though, that we're in a very difficult situation right now in the build-up to Brexit, and we don't know what's going to happen. And that's the whole point of having silver. It is a hedge against the unknown for the future. Brexit could go either way at the moment. It could either end up as a complete no deal, or the Conservatives and Boris Johnson could, pull out a fantastic deal, and we could be happy as Larry. Who knows? Except everybody is not going to be happy as Larry. There'll always be some people who are not going to be happy with whatever deals come out there. But you hear, and I always take these with a pinch of salt. So my thinking is evolving, don't get me wrong. And, for those of you who are hardcore sort of preppers and stackers out there, you might be glad to hear that my thinking is changing. However, I'm not in that mindset still where I need to go out and I need to have a pantry full of tin food and drinking water and, guns and roses and all of that jazz. It's just, that's not me, and I don't genuinely think that's a likely scenario. But what is for sure is that financial markets side of things, we're in a little interesting time right now. There's no doubting that, especially with the potential for Brexit, no deals. And if that happens and the economy, and look, I'm not saying that if there was a no deal, that the Brexit economy, post-Brexit no deal economy will completely collapse. All I'm trying to say is that if there was a situation by which the brown stuff hit the fan and the pound completely lost all of its value, we have got this shiny stuff here that can help us. And I heard a very interesting piece on the radio this morning, which got me inspired to create this video actually. So there's a theory that London is 6 days from starvation. And that is if there was a financial blackout or a financial collapse and banking institutions failed completely. And we've seen this happen before, 2008, 2009, and to a certain extent 2011 as well. Many different banks really struggled, and there were people who were queuing up for hours and hours and hours to get cash out of their banks. And in some cases, that was difficult. And it's very interesting that you think about it like that. If everything goes to pot in that first couple of days, people might still continue to go to work, but when they start to not have any money to go and buy their food, if their debit cards don't work, if their bank cards don't work, and if they can't get cash out of the ATMs, what do you do? And it's that real disaster scenario that we're 6 days from starvation, which is it's quite scary, really, if you think about it. We live in the 21st century, and to have a situation by which the world could be at that brink within 6 days of an unknown situation. And, we live in such a tumultuous world right now. There's so much happening in this world. We've got trade wars with China and America. We've got the North Korea situation. We've got the Middle East is a powder keg, and so many other issues out there at the moment which could lead to some quite significant turmoil out there in the world. So it's really interesting to see how silver, and fractional silver especially, might play a role in that kind of brown stuff hitting the fan. Try not to say the S word here because YouTube will probably demonetize me. But, the brown stuff hitting the fan is looking more and more likely. And that's something I didn't really think I would be thinking about, especially when I got started with stacking silver all the way back a couple of years ago. So how does that affect me as a investor and stacker? So I've got numerous different fingers and different pies when it comes to silver. I've got stuff with numismatics, I've got proofs, I've got bullion, I've got fractional old school silver, I've got fractional gold, I've got larger denomination gold. So how am I prepared right now for those eventualities? Well, I like to think I'm pretty well prepared in terms of the gold and silver side of things. If there was a situation by which the brown stuff hit that fan and splattered everywhere, I do like to think that we've got a significant part of our wealth locked up in these precious metals, which is preserved. And that's a really, really good thing. In terms of going forward, now this is an interesting point because this year is, well, it's very, very interesting for the movement of precious metals. So gold and silver have gone up quite considerably. Silver, more so in this last couple of weeks than gold, which is interesting in its own right. And we could see a potential continuation of the run of silver, which would be very nice to know or to have for a change. Silver has been historically pretty low over this last couple of years. But at the same time, if my thinking now is very much more along the lines of, well, I think having a little bit more of the percentage of the portfolio going into metals in the event that we get some horrible no-deal situations, or, a huge trade war with China escalates to an economic war, full-on economic war, or even, God forbid, something even more drastic happens, there'd be interesting, premises out there to have a lot more silver in one stack so that you have that barter economy. But the problem I face, and it's interesting for me to have that kind of refreshing take on things and have that evolution of the way I'm thinking, and I like that. I like that I'm learning a lot, and that's what I always strive to do with silver and gold and everything that I get involved with. I always want to learn about things, but I still find it very hard to really get to grips with the potential for this stuff here to be used in everyday sort of situations. Going down to the shops and buying your groceries with it. I just can't see that happening, and there's a few reasons for that. It's not necessarily that it's the silver's fault. I think it's more around the fact that it's society's fault. Now, granted, in a brown stuff hit the fan scenario, there really could be some different situations out there in terms of mentality thinking for the greater population of the world, and that might well be what saves silver in my regard for being a bartering tool. But if you just went down to the shops right now, the vast majority of people would just flat out refuse to take one of these. This Canadian dollar here is probably worth about 20 quid in silver, or maybe a little less. I can't remember how much they weigh, but it's probably worth about 15 quid in silver. Could you take that down to the local shop and exchange it for some, for some food? Probably not. I would say unless it's a small independent shop and you're lucky enough that the owner knows about the world of silver and coins and he's happy to take that as a form of payment in a barter style economy, then you're happy days. But otherwise, I don't think that is going to be likely. So that puts me in a quandary about whether or not to continue buying lots of silver for that reason. So whilst my thinking is evolving, I also think that for me and for our situation here in the Backyard Bullion household, I like to think that we're protected one way or the other, and I can definitely see the potential of this stuff here to really help us in those situations and scenarios. I just don't see a scenario like that happening in the first place, and if there was a scenario like that happening, I'm not entirely convinced that it would be as useful as many people think. Now, I'm not saying that if you're a prepper and you've got all of these bits of silver in your stack, in your in your bunker somewhere, that you're going to be wasting your time and money with it. I definitely don't think that. I think there's a definite potential for it, but it's just a really interesting way of thinking. It's definitely interesting. Now, in terms of all of the other side of things of prepping, so that's my evolution of thinking as regards to silver. I do think about having enough supplies in the house. Generally, though, it's an interesting one. We kind of take for granted now in this world that everything's going to be just hunky-dory, and we're going to have, the shops are going to be open. The shops are going to be open, and we're going to be able to go there and pay for things. And a lot of the time, Mrs. Backyard Bullion and I, we don't necessarily go and do a weekly great big shop. We have so much garden produce and vegetables that come out that we tend to just go and buy perhaps the little bits of meat that we might want to have with our vegetables, do a nice stir fry or make a nice pie or something like that, like we did the other night with all of our veggies. So we don't really plan ahead, but we are incredibly keen to be as self-sufficient as possible. So it's the small things like having as many vegetables as we can fit into our little small garden at the moment, which by no means gives us any kind of semblance of self-sufficiency across the whole year, but we definitely have been pretty self-sufficient in terms of vegetables for the year. So it does make me think about that. We have now 2 great big water collection butts, rainwater collection systems in our back garden, and we are absolutely obsessed with them. Like whenever it's dry, we always use those to water the garden, saving as much water as possible. And then if it looks like it's going to rain, we try and fill up as many water buckets and watering cans and things like that, so we can collect as much rainwater as possible. And that's definitely a different way of thinking that we've come across. And that's not necessarily around prepping, but it's more about the self-sufficiency side of things, which is, I think, really important. And I quite like that, and we kind of just enjoy it. So it's a little bit of an enjoyment part of things, but it definitely has got some rings to me of that kind of prepping side of things. So that is my kind of thinking and how it's evolving. By no means am I a prepper, but I can see more and more these days the benefits of it, which I think is fascinating, because genuinely and this was, again, no disrespect to any stackers out there who are specifically prepping, I was never in that camp. I'm also of the firm belief that if there was a brown stuff hitting the fan scenario or nuclear war or something, that I would be well on that first wave of people just to be vaporized or to just go away. So I don't think that I need to take it that seriously, but at the same time I can see why, and I can really get to grips with it and understand it a lot more, which I think is a fascinating change in my thinking. So that's my thoughts on the situation as it is. I'd love to know your situation. Have recent events around the world started changing the way you're thinking? Started, having the outlook being a little more pessimistic? I guess that's one of the things. I've always been a bit more of an optimist in my life, but I can see now why pessimism is sneaking in a lot more, and I'm certainly getting a lot more pessimistic about how things are going to be going out there. And it's just, you just never know. You just never know, which is why this stuff is so important, because it's a hedge, it's protecting your wealth, it's something that is a really good thing to save money. So many people will go out on the weekend and they'll spend hundreds of pounds. I remember when I used to work in sort of business management. I won't go into too much detail to protect kind of my privacy, but a lot of my colleagues and a lot of different people within the businesses that I worked in would always moan that they were out of money in that last week before payday. And these were people who would be on pretty decent salaries. They would be like, well, I can't eat this week, I have to eat beans on toast. And there were a few people that every month, as payday came around, that weekend that payday hit, the next Monday, they'd come in and they'd be ranting and raving about the new PS4 they've bought, or the night out that they had in London, or something ridiculous like that, and spending hundreds of pounds. This hobby saves you money. It's money that is sitting here on the table that you can get out of if you need to, not only in a brown stuff scenario, but also just generally in life. And I think it's a really, really good way of being able to save cash and save money for the future. So let me know your thoughts on this really fascinating topic and situation. If you're a hardcore prepper out there, I'd love to know your take on this situation and how you got to that way of thinking in the first place. Has it been a slow evolution, or is it just something that you've decided that you want to take up If you are like me and generally an optimist in life, and you've started to question how things might go in the future, I'd love to know from you as well. So all I ask is please be respectful of mine and other people's opinions down in the comment section, and I'll see you down there for a good, fun, healthy debate. If you enjoyed today's video, please hit the thumbs up and share it around on your social media. That would be very helpful for everything we do here on the channel. Otherwise, have a fantastic week. Thank you one and all for watching, and please make sure that you like, share, comment and subscribe for more.